Hello, everyone. If you're looking for a job in the networking field or in security or data center profile, then this interview experience of mine can help you to get or crack the interview from any of the big companies that you can apply. And there will be more expecting. You will find a great help on these questions that I'll be sharing with you, that you can expect these questions in your interview. So I'll tell you my experience, how my interview was aligned, and how I started, and how the interview actually took place. So it was a call from a consultant, and then they arrange an interview with the client. I will not share the name of the client, but the client is very reputed and international client. So they asked me my available time for an interview, and I said, okay, let's agree on this day, and then I'm sorry, and then the interview was on Microsoft Team. It was 1 hour interview, and what they started with, there were four guys in the panel. I will not name them as well. I know the names. They're very smart, very knowledgeable, and everyone was doing their job very nicely. So they communicated me very nice way, and I didn't feel that I'm not working with them. I feel like I'm working with them, and they were more knowledge sharing, and more helpful in the way they speak and the way they communicate with me. So let's jump into the conclusion of the interview. I'll try to shorten my interview. I will try to shorten my talk on this to get you an important questions. If you can write down. I will speak only. This will be my first recording that I'll be posting in terms of interview experience, so the people can get benefit out of it and take a lot of understanding how the interviews can be taken, can be helpful if you can just listen to my tips and the points that I can give you. So let's start with the first thing. One of the gentlemen, he introduced himself and the team, and they asked me to turn my camera on, and I did my camera on, and then they introduced the company, and they introduced the projects, and they introduced the client. They did not share the name of the client, but they said which location they are. They were in United States and Europe, or some part of Europe as well. So once they did all this, they asked me a question. Do you have any question, so that you can ask before we start to get to know you more? Then I said, yeah, I had a little question about security part, so I did ask, which is not important. So the first question they asked me about my introduction, so I did explain to me my experience and everything, and then they started asking questions. Now here comes the important part that everyone should know. So they start with me from the basic, like they handed over. There was one gentleman from the networking side. He was managing and troubleshooting, or a technical guy from the network side. So he started asking me questions from the switching, from the port configuration, to the port security, to the spanning tree, to the VSS. So you need to know these concepts thoroughly: the port configuration, the port security, STP, that is spanning tree protocol, and VSS for the virtual switching, for the HA, high available, the core switches. So you should know the core, and you should know the access layer. Okay, now the gentleman asked me a questions about routing. So which all routing protocol you start? He started me from the internet router. So he asked me, do you know the BGP, how the BGP works? And he started me asking the questions. So the second thing for you is to know about BGP, how the BGP works, and how the BGP, what is the role of BGP in any organization if you're working with in the routing or internet connectivity. environment. And then he come up to the LAN connectivity for the EIGRP and OSPF. So you should know thoroughly OSPF and EIGRP. And then he asked me about HSRP. HSRP also you should know about the hot standby routing protocol. This is very important. So now, now I have given you three areas that you need to work on. One on the routing protocol, then the switching, and then the gentleman asked me about the firewall. What is firewall? How many types of firewall you have in your organization? And then he tried to gauge an understanding about me, about my understanding of firewall. And then he asked me a related questions from the firewall. But in firewall, he just asked me a simple question about NATing. He asked me about dynamic NATing, static NATing, and also he said the dual NAT, which I could not answer. So if anyone of you have an understanding of a dual NAT, can explain to me. He explained to me in the session. He said dual NAT is the same subnet can have a multiple internet. So I was confused on that, and I'm not sure about this part, so I did not answer him properly. Then there was another nice gentleman. He was heading from US side. He started asking me questions from virtualization. So he asked me about server side virtualization he said, are you comfortable with virtualization? I said, yes, let's go ahead and jump into the questions. So I gave him the answers from Microsoft Hyper Virtualizations he asked me, and then he asked me about the sizing, about the virtual environment, how do you do it, and then he asked me about the troubleshooting in the virtual environment, what you do. So that was quite easy for me. And if you know about virtualization, you can easily handle. And then he asked me about the network part as well, how the virtualization happen in the network, like in the switches configuration, like VLANs on the switches. If you have work on the HP side, HP switches and the Blade servers, they have their own switches and they can configure their VLANs on that. And then he jumped on to a load balancer. So he asked me specific for F5 load balancing. So he asked me an application load balancing. He asked me the difference between LTM and GTM. He asked me about cookies. He asked me about round robin. And he asked me about health check. So this is very important. You should know about when you're going to appear and you have an understanding for load balancer, then you should know about application load balancing. You should know LTM and GTM. You should know cookies. You should know round robin. You should know how to check the health check on the device. And then he asked me, because I have a background of security audit, and then he asked me a related questions from the audit, which I'll not cover here. And then he asked me about the data center, because I did some data center audit. And he asked me about related security product, that is endpoint security from Symantec. So he asked me, do you know about Symantec? I said, yes, I know, I have a good understanding. So I did explain to him about that. So you should know a little bit about endpoint security, be it any Symantec or any other product. And then he asked about how I take backups. He asked me about the security devices backup, how I take backup from especially for the firewall, the ASA firewall. And then custom health check, and then how I do customization, how I do automation. So very important nowadays, automations are very much required in any interview. If you are appearing for an interview, you should know automations. So in automations you can say I have done automation in batch file or Python or VB script or any other language, programming language that you can try to do some automations, especially in networking. That would be a great help in the current scenarios of interview. And then he gave me a P1 incident. He said an app was earlier working fine, now kind of slow. And then he gave me a scenario between two data centers, and then the application was connected from different data center. So you can expect question like this for the P1. And then you need to explain to them about the way of your troubleshooting. If you can explain to them, that's the key. You can get into the job easily. So this is all about, and this I want to conclude now. I want to conclude my talk by telling you that first he asked me about the network questions, then virtualization questions, then were load balancing questions, and then he gave me a troubleshooting step to explain to me. This interview was quite long, for around 55 or 1 hour, 1 hour session, and there was multiple jump in questions. So from this interview, take what you can take is try to be normal in your interview. Try to understand each and every question properly. Listen to the question very keenly, and then try to answer them in a proper way. Because sometimes you do not articulate or explain them in the proper way, so that can negate to you. So relax, feel calm, and then try to give answer. The interviewer will not kill you, and even if you don't get a job, you will get experience, so that's fine. You just try to be normal, try to behave as normal as you can, and then think that this is a learning phase. And for those who are currently working, they should also appear for interviews, because there are many opportunities that can give you a different paradigm and different organization that can lead you in a bigger and better way. So my my sincere uh, my sincere given and advice is that you should try to be normal as you can in the interview, and take the questions properly, and try to go through my this session again, because maybe I'm not clear in some point, but they are very valuable points, and they can help you a lot. So try to listen to this record, and listen to this record again at least twice to get a better understanding. I will be preparing another video, another recording, another video, and that will be the comprehensive step by step what questions they ask me. And I will try to fetch some recording that I did during the interview. So I will post it on that. That is around 50 minutes. So people who have time can try and take this session, 50 minutes of their time, and then that session can help them a lot in the interview. So listening interviews and trying to understand the interviewer's concept and point of taking questions and asking questions can help you a lot. So thank you very much for listening. I hope it's informative for you.